Eminences, Excellencies, sisters and brothers, I've been asked by Don Valentino Cortini to move from history to futurology. And I have been myself involved with the Institute, Pontifical Institute for Arabic and Islamic Studies since the late 1960s. But I consider myself more as a teacher, an administrator, rather than a prophet or visionary. I hope that I will be able to see some indications in the crystal ball which might suggest the way for the future. But let me start with picking up something that Father Bormann's already mentioned just at the end there, the transfer of this institute from Tunisia to Rome. In sociological terms or anthropological terms, I think we could talk about an enlargement of scale. The concern being the training of personnel for Christian-Muslim relations, not only in North Africa or in the continent of Africa as a whole, but also in Asia and in Europe, and in fact in any part of the world where Christian and Muslims meet. And this wider perspective necessarily implied the addition of English as a medium of instruction besides French. And I apologize for speaking English rather than Italian this evening. So this has continued in PISAI and also at the level of the publications, Encounter, Documents for Muslim-Christian Understanding was added to the publications, I think, in 1974. But of course, as most pontifical institutes in Rome teach through the medium of Italian, an evening introductory course given in Italian was also introduced into PISAI to reach a wider public. The global perspective, which is the PISAI's context today, means that attention has to be given to the variety of ways in which Islam is lived, from Mauritania to Mindanao, from Samarkand to Sydney. Of course, the constants are many, but the differences determined by cultural factors are significant. It has been and it will be impossible for PISAI to deal in depth with each local form of Islam. Though a series of lectures have been given and presumably will continue to be given on Islam in Africa or Islam in Asia, and I think it might be necessary to add lectures on Islam in the Western world, whether it be Europe, North America, or Australia. The situation of what were and remain to some extent immigrant communities, but which transform into settled communities, is constantly changing and needs to be monitored. Incidentally, one hope for the future is that the churches in the West, the Catholic Church, but also other churches and communities, might take the challenge of Islam more seriously and would have people trained to encourage and guide Christian-Muslim relations at the local level. PISAI has welcomed such students and would willingly receive more. As I've said, PISAI cannot hope to cover all local situations. It would seem to me that its role has to be focused on forming people who will then be able to give formation at the local level. And we will be hearing about this in this conference from people who are taking up this task, whether in a Christian or in a Muslim environment. As Don Cotino has said, within the solid formation that is given, the teaching of Arabic remains significant. For not only is Arabic the sacral language of Islam, but it has also influenced the languages and of all cultures that have been marked by Islam. And moreover, Muslim religious leaders and scholars, wherever they are, tend to refer to the same sources. So, in looking to the future, I wouldn't want PISAI to renounce the teaching of Arabic. On the contrary, I think the training in Arabic of future formators will provide them with firmer grounding. There is, for example, considerable difference between studying the Quran in its original Arabic and studying it through translations. At the moment, though I'm supposed to be residing in Jerusalem, I am currently engaged at John Carroll University in Cleveland, Ohio, in leading a seminar entitled Exploring the Quran. Arabic is not a requirement for this seminar, so the students will be reading the Quran in English. No one translation into English is mandatory. Students have been left to make their own choice. And it can be very instructive to see how passages from the Quran are translated differently. Yet someone has to be able to understand the Arabic text, which lies at the basis of the different translations. I say that because, to my mind, a knowledge of the Arabic text provides some protection from developing unjustified theories on the basis of approximations. Consequently, the study of Arabic remains of capital importance in the PISAI curriculum. On the other hand, PISAI should ideally be able to offer tuition in other languages of the Islamic world, in particular Farsi and Turkish, but also perhaps Urdu and Bahasa Indonesian, since Indonesia has the greatest Muslim population in the world. I remember that in the 70s, the possibility of instituting a chair of Turkish had been raised. An inquiry was made with regard to the number of people who might be interested, and the result showed that such a project was not viable. And I think that would remain true today. So I'm not suggesting a chair of Arabic or Urdu or Bahasa or Farsi, but rather that a language component might be offered within the coursework required for doctoral students, particularly if the topic of their doctoral thesis demands the knowledge of another language. And here, I think, there would be an opportunity for the different embassies to the Holy See to provide occasional tutors in these languages. But the differences within Islam are not only linguistic and cultural, but also theological. PISAI is generally engaged in acquainting people with mainstream Islam, in effect with moderate Sunni Islam. And I wouldn't want to contest that, for insistence on the fundamental aspects of Islam is fully justified. This is not a return to the past, but rather an understanding of a living tradition which allows one to assess more accurately current trends. because these current trends can sometimes be merely deviations, but they can also be authentic developments. Nevertheless, despite this insistence on the mainstream and the main foundations of Islam, it seems necessary to me to take into account the variety of tendencies which exist within Islam. And I would say that there is a particular need to pay serious attention to Shiite Islam, since Shiism has acquired added significance in the politico-religious context of today's world. I know that PISAI is not an institute of political science, yet it cannot make abstraction entirely of the current political situation. A glance at the order of PISAI for this academic year shows that courses in Shiism are scheduled. But may I be allowed to wonder whether that is enough? Is sufficient recognition given to the Shiite views of the origins of Islam, which leads the author of a Shiite commentary on the Quran, which I have studied myself, to talk about Shiism as original Islam? Does the study of the Quran in the first-year program for the licentiate take into account the Shiite understanding of the book? Is there a Shiite component in the program of the second year of the licentiate? These are questions for the staff of PISAI to examine. But attention needs to be given also to different approaches to Islam within the Islamic world itself. One could say that one such tendency is a rather static understanding of the religion current in established Islam. And I remember in the past when Muslims were invited as visiting lecturers, the students would sometimes say, "But we didn't learn anything new." And this always consoled me, because it only confirmed that PISAI was truly initiating people into mainstream Islam. There can be a danger of paying attention only to those who have modern ideas, which are closer to our own, and not giving a more traditional approach its true significance. But you have the jihadi understanding of Islam, which appears to be having some success today. It can be instructive to see through a study of history the movements of jihad have always existed within the world of Islam. Usually these were localized and they faded out after a short while. The globalization in today's world makes the appeal to jihad a recurrent and dangerous phenomenon. It is really only on the basis of Islamic tradition and a true understanding of what Sharia means and the Islamic ideal entails that such a phenomenon of jihadi Islam can be judged. And I think this underlines the importance for PISAI of imparting a solid knowledge of Islam without feeling obliged to follow every new trend. And yet, there are new trends in the understanding of Islam which deserve attention. And I'm not thinking here so much of revisionist approaches to Islamic history proposed by Western scholars, but rather of attempts made by Muslims to understand their religion within the present-day context. And there is also a growing feminist approach to Islam on the part of Muslim women scholars. Perhaps PISAI, through its publications and its public conferences, can render a service to all those interested in Islam by making these studies from different parts of the world better known. Although the main thrust of studies at PISAI has always been on Islam as a religion, it may be necessary and useful to give greater consideration to the political aspect of Islam, or to the relationship between religion and politics. In particular, since PISAI would wish to offer possibilities for training Christians for relations with Muslims, not only in those countries where Muslims are in the majority, but also where Muslims are in the minority, it would be useful to examine case studies of such situations. One of the needs will be to take into account the different Islamic organizations that have sprung up. And it may be noted in passing that the journal of the Institute, one of the journals, Islamo-Christiana, has a tradition of presenting articles on Islam and Christian-Muslim relations in different countries. I think that attention should also be given to the development of Islamic sites on the internet, especially since these sites often escape the control of Islamic authorities. Now I can see Don Valentino and the staff members of PISAI shaking their heads in disbelief or raising their arms in distress. How can we be expected to cover all this material? Well, I would reply that the different tendencies within Islam and the variety in the situations of Christian-Muslim relations don't necessarily need to be the content of separate courses. They can be explored through seminars, and some of the topics can also be taken up in the interactive days that PISAI organizes periodically within its program. Now, as a pontifical institute, PISAI has to make sure that its offerings for the study of Islam are in line with the indications given by the Second Vatican Council, Nostra Aetate, Lumen Gentium, and so on. The Council, as is well known, encouraged Christians to enter with prudence and charity into discussion and collaboration with members of other religions. And referring specifically to relations between Christians and Muslims, urged that a sincere effort be made to achieve mutual understanding, working together to preserve and promote peace, liberty, social justice, and moral values. It is important to know the teaching of the Magisterium. And here the volume that His Excellency Monsignor Francesco Gioia has produced on behalf of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue can prove most useful. The latest edition of this work goes up to the end of the pontificate of Benedict XVI. So, it's a big tome like that. Yet, the Magisterium continues on beyond Benedict XVI with Pope Francis. And nor can theology be confined to the official teaching of the Catholic Church. There are investigations of different theologians to be examined also. And the study of Islam needs to be accompanied by a corresponding study of Christianity. Ideally, this is done within the different courses, whether they are dealing with scriptures, with the various fields of Islamic theology, with questions of law, with the development of spirituality and mysticism. And again, the interactive days may provide a better forum for going more deeply into questions which can only be touched upon in classes. I come to the end. It would seem to me to be important for the PISAI as such and for individual staff members of PISAI to continue to be in contact with Islamic institutions throughout the world, and indeed to increase and multiply these contacts. Contact with Muslim institutions where special attention is given to Christianity would be particularly useful. Exchanges of lecturers might be facilitated. Academic conferences involving different institutions can be helpful in allowing increased cooperation to develop. The PISAI is pleased and honored, I am sure, when its staff members are invited to take part in formal dialogue meetings, whether by the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue or other bodies. I would be inclined to say that this dialogue should not be restricted to the bilateral dimension, Christian-Muslim dialogue. In fact, participation in dialogues where people of a number of religions are brought together can be truly instructive and inspiring. It is perhaps through such meetings that a climate of peaceful cooperation can be created. Now, I have a feeling that Don Valentino must be regretting having invited me to speak. There are so many expectations of the Pontifical Institute for Arabic and Islamic Studies, which is, after all, the only pontifical institute specifically dedicated to the formation of Christian-Muslim relations. It's obvious that it will not be possible to fulfill all these expectations, or at least not all of them to the same degree. And something else becomes immediately clear. In order to correspond to these expectations, the PISAI will need all the support that it can get. After 50 years, it is well established in Rome within the circle of pontifical institutes, where there is a growing spirit of cooperation. It has benefited from the assistance given by the Congregation for Catholic Education, from the interest shown by the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, for the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, and other bodies of the Roman Curia. It has enjoyed the friendship and collaboration of the embassies to the Holy See of different countries and of different organizations that promote dialogue. I'm confident that this support will continue, allowing the PISAI to rise to the challenges presented by the world today and maintain its valid contribution to the world of Christian-Muslim relations for the next 50 years and beyond. Thank you.